She stood in my living room, holding the silver locket in her palm like it belonged to her. My great-grandmother's heirloom, the one passed down through 5 generations, was dangling from her fingers like it was a cheap trinket. The same heirloom that survived the Great Depression, 2 house fires, and a cross-country move. Her voice was shrill, panicked, loud enough to wake the neighbors. "He's in my house! He broke in! He's threatening me!" She was on the phone with 911, and I stood there, shocked, speechless, holding my mail in one hand and my own house key in the other. That's when 2 squad cars pulled up to the curb. I hadn't even taken off my shoes. I opened my mouth to explain, but the officer was already walking up my steps, his hand resting on his holster. Karen, my HOA president, put on the tears like a Netflix actress, sobbing into the phone. "He's unstable. I'm scared for my life." And that heirloom? Still clutched in her hand like a prize. What they didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that I owned this house. I had the deed, the taxes, the closing documents signed with sweat and sacrifice. I built this home from the ground up after my father passed. And that heirloom? It was the last thing he gave me before he died. But now I was being treated like an intruder in my own home. And that was only the beginning. 2 weeks earlier, it had all seemed so peaceful. I had just moved back into my childhood neighborhood after being away for years. College, grad school, my first job in Austin, a short stint in Phoenix. And then I got a remote opportunity that paid well enough for me to come back and buy a home in my old town. Mom and Dad were gone. Mom passed when I was 19, Dad 2 years ago. But the memories here felt like home. When I found a charming 2-story house on Sycamore Lane, with a swing on the porch and a view of the lake behind it, I jumped at the chance. The owner, a retired veteran named Mr. Malcolm, had kept it in great shape, and I loved that it didn't have a cookie-cutter feel like the rest of the newer homes around. The house was inside a HOA-regulated neighborhood. I didn't mind at first. I'd never had any run-ins with HOA folks before. Besides, I figured if everyone followed the rules, it would help keep things neat. I didn't realize yet that sometimes the people enforcing the rules were the biggest problem. Karen was the first person to welcome me to the neighborhood. She showed up at my front door with a clipboard and a glassy smile. Blonde bob, pastel sweater, nails like claws. She looked like she'd walked out of a catalog. "You must be the new owner," she said, eyeing my moving boxes on the porch like they were garbage. "I'm Karen, president of the HOA. We like to keep things orderly around here." I gave her a polite smile. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jordan." Her eyes twitched. "Jordan? Right. Are you renting or—" "I bought it. Closed last week." She blinked. "Oh, well," she said, regaining her fake cheer. "Just make sure your trash cans are brought in by 9 a.m. on Mondays, and no street parking overnight. We also discourage political signs, wind chimes, and, how should I put this, unapproved modifications." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what any of that had to do with a welcome. I should have seen the signs from that first day, but I was trying to stay positive. The first few days went smoothly enough. I unpacked, made some calls, started setting up my home office. I even introduced myself to a few of the neighbors, Miss Charlotte across the street, who gave me fresh lemon bars, and Glenn, the retired school janitor who had 2 noisy Pomeranians and a laugh that echoed down the whole block. But Karen always seemed to be hovering. She'd walk past the house at odd hours, pretending to check her mailbox. Once, she caught me trimming the hedges and warned me about the approved plant height for front yard shrubs. Another time, she knocked just to remind me that decorative flags weren't allowed, even though mine was just a small, faded welcome banner my mom used to hang every fall. Still, I shrugged it off. But then, things started getting weird. It was a Friday afternoon when I left town for a quick weekend trip. I'd told Miss Charlotte I'd be gone until Sunday night. My friend from college was getting married in Atlanta, and I figured it'd be nice to get away, decompress, and see some old faces. What I didn't know was that while I was away, Someone had entered my home. At first, I thought I was imagining it. When I came back Sunday night, the place looked fine. Door locked, no broken windows. But there were little things. A drawer that was open, a lamp slightly tilted, my grandmother's old cookbook on the kitchen table when I knew I'd packed it away. And then, there was the locket. The one my dad gave me in a small blue box before he passed. The one I kept in the top drawer of my bedroom dresser, wrapped in a silk handkerchief. Gone. I tore the whole room apart, checked every bag, every pocket, under the bed, behind the dresser. Nothing. I started to panic. I couldn't prove anything was stolen. There was no forced entry, no cameras set up yet. I had just moved in. And besides, who would I accuse? Karen? That seemed crazy, at the time. But something in my gut told me to be careful. The next few days, I tried to act normal, smiled at Karen when she walked by, took my trash out by 8:55 a.m. I even went to the HOA meeting that Wednesday night in the clubhouse, just to show I was being neighborly. Karen barely looked at me until the weekend came. That Saturday morning, I ran to the post office to pick up a package I missed the day before. It was supposed to be a 15-minute errand. When I returned, I noticed something odd. Karen's car was parked halfway across my driveway. The front door was wide open. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to lock it, but I never leave the front door open. I walked faster, my heartbeat thudding in my chest. And then I stepped inside. There she was, in my living room, holding the locket. It was glowing in the morning light. The silver looked brighter than I remembered. I stood frozen, gripping the doorknob. My voice cracked. "What? What are you doing in my house?" Karen jumped. Then, without missing a beat, she screamed. "He broke in!" she shouted. "Help! He's in my house!" She pulled out her phone and dialed. I just stood there, stunned. Then I heard the words, "Yes, 911. There's a man in my home. He's yelling. I don't know what he's going to do." My name was Jordan Thomas. I owned that home, and she was calling the cops on me. I took one slow step forward, trying not to shout, trying not to lose it. "Karen, you have something that belongs to me. That locket." She backed up like I'd pulled a knife. "That's mine!" she shrieked. "I found it. It was outside." "You were in my bedroom," I said, trying to stay calm. "That locket has been in my family for 100 years. "I don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. "You don't even live here." I blinked, and that's when the police pulled up. I didn't have time to explain. I didn't even know how to. Because in Karen's eyes, and maybe in theirs, I was just some guy standing in a house that wasn't mine. But what none of them knew was that she'd just made a very, very big mistake, and I had the paperwork to prove it. The moment the officer stepped through the door, I could feel the weight of suspicion pressing down on me like a boulder. He was a tall man, late 40s maybe, with a shaved head and sharp eyes that flicked from me to Karen, then to the open doorway. His partner, a younger cop with a square jaw and unsure posture, stayed behind him like backup in a crime movie. Karen rushed toward them like she'd rehearsed this scene. "Officers, thank God you're here. I was so scared. He just barged in." She pointed at me, shaking, tears already forming at the corner of her eyes. "He threatened me. I think he's unstable. I don't know what he's capable of." I was still standing in the doorway, too stunned to move. The silver locket gleamed from her palm as she tucked it quickly behind her back. "Sir," the older officer said to me firmly, "step outside." "I live here," I replied, my voice calm but hard. "This is my home." The officer's eyes narrowed. "We got a report of a break-in." "By the actual homeowner," I said, holding up my keys. "Sir, I'm going to ask you again, please step outside. We'll sort this out." I clenched my jaw but obeyed. The last thing I needed was for this to escalate. As I stepped out onto the porch, the younger cop followed me, hand still close to his holster. Miss Charlotte across the street had stepped onto her porch, watching. So had Glenn and his yappy dogs, barking madly at the commotion. Inside, I could hear Karen still talking to the officer. Her voice shifted, dropped to a whisper like she was sharing state secrets, probably spinning a tale of how she found me snooping around or creeping through the neighborhood. Meanwhile, I stood there on my own porch, accused of being a criminal in the house I'd sacrificed years of hard work to afford. "You got any ID?" the younger cop asked me. "Yeah," I said, fishing my wallet out slowly. "And I've got the deed to the house, too. It's inside my office, right past the hallway." He looked unsure, like he didn't know if he should believe me yet. But I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I handed him my license. "Jordan Thomas," he read. "This is your current address?" "Yes." He hesitated. "Just hang tight." A few minutes later, the older officer came out. Karen wasn't far behind, arms folded tight, looking furious that I was still standing there like I belonged. The older cop took my license from his partner and compared it to the address Karen had given. He looked at me. "This says you live here." "Because I do." Karen's face tightened like she'd just swallowed a lemon. But he wasn't on the HOA registry. He only just showed up out of nowhere. He doesn't even follow the bylaws. I saw the house unlocked and—" "You entered my house," I interrupted, not shouting but loud enough to silence her. "While I was gone. That's breaking and entering." Her mouth opened, then shut. The officers looked between us, clearly unsure who to believe. The younger one finally said, "Do you have any paperwork to confirm ownership?" "Yes. I'll go get it." They insisted one of them accompany me. I didn't care. I led him to my home office and opened the locked filing drawer. Inside, in a neatly labeled folder, were all the documents: title deed, closing paperwork, mortgage statement, utility bills. I handed it over. He skimmed it, then showed it to his partner. When they came back out, there was a shift in the air. "Well," the older cop said, clearing his throat, "looks like Mr. Thomas does live here." Karen's jaw dropped. "There must be some mistake," she snapped. He's not even on the HOA contact list. He didn't get approval to move in." I took a slow step forward. "Karen, you were in my house. You had no right to be in here, and you took something. A family heirloom. I'd like it back." Her face went red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "She had it in her hand," I said, pointing. "When I walked in." The officers looked at her. One of them asked, "Ma'am, do you have anything that belongs to him?" She turned away. No, I thought it was trash. It was just lying around. It was in a drawer, in my room." The silence stretched. Miss Charlotte, still watching from across the street, suddenly shouted, "I saw her go in, yesterday. She used a key." Karen spun. "That's a lie." "Is it?" I said. "Because I never gave you a key, and I don't remember inviting you in." The officers glanced at each other again. The tension in the air was thick now, charged like a storm about to break. Karen, fuming, turned and marched off my porch. "This isn't over," she snapped. "I'll be speaking with the board." The officers stayed a minute longer, just enough to caution me to avoid any future incidents and document everything. They didn't arrest her. They didn't even take a report, but they left knowing the truth. And Karen? She knew she'd just been caught. Still, I didn't feel satisfied. The heirloom was missing. She didn't hand it over, and I didn't see her drop it. I searched the house afterward, checked every corner. But it was gone. I had a sick feeling in my gut that she still had it, or had stashed it somewhere. That night, as the sun dipped behind the lake and painted the sky with streaks of orange, I sat on the porch swing and tried to breathe. Glenn came by with one of his Pomeranians and offered me a beer. I declined. "You all right, Jordan?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just processing. Karen's a handful, always has been. But stealing? That's new, even for her. I'm going to get that locket back," I said quietly. "One way or another." He nodded. Well, if you need anything, you got friends on this street. You let me know. That gave me a small sliver of peace. But it didn't last long, because the next morning I woke up to something even more shocking. A letter was taped to my door. It was from the HOA, and according to them, I was now being fined for trespassing on private property. My own home. And that wasn't even the worst part. The letter said the board had decided to review my residency and evaluate if I met their community standards. Karen wasn't done. She was just getting started. I stood at my front door for a long time, staring at the paper taped there like it was a joke gone too far. But it wasn't a joke. The HOA letterhead was crisp, official. The wording was legal enough to sound serious, but vague enough to be a threat. Trespassing on HOA-managed property, it read, and behavior inconsistent with community expectations may result in further fines, sanctions, or formal removal procedures. I crumpled the paper in my hand, the knot in my chest tightening. Removal procedures? From my own house? I didn't sleep much that night. My mind ran in circles. I kept thinking about the locket, how Karen had it in her hand, and how the officers had let her walk away. I kept replaying her expression when I caught her in the act, like she didn't even feel guilt, just the shock of being interrupted. I had half a mind to go knock on her door right then and there and demand it back. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to be smart about this. Whatever Karen was up to, she was organized, and she wasn't working alone. That letter had the HOA board's stamp on it, which meant she had people on her side, or at least people who didn't know the full story. So I made a decision. I went online and printed out copies of every document I had: the deed, the mortgage statement, utilities in my name, insurance policy, even the moving company's invoice with the date of delivery. Then I started emailing the HOA board members one by one. I kept it respectful, professional, just the facts. But I didn't stop there. I started talking to neighbors more. I found out something interesting from Miss Charlotte. She told me that Karen had been on the HOA board for 7 years straight. Nobody even runs against her anymore, she said. People are too tired to fight. She's nosy, but she's never been this bad before. Glenn told me that Karen had keys to at least 3 houses on the street. People had given her access for emergencies, and she'd never given them back. Then there was Marcia, a single mom who lived on the corner. She told me that last year, Karen fined her $500 for excessive lawn decorations, just because her daughter had put up Halloween inflatables. I couldn't afford to fight it, she said. And when I asked for a breakdown of the rule, she said it was a special circumstance clause. It was starting to make sense. Karen wasn't just nosy, she was running the HOA like her personal kingdom. But she hadn't counted on someone like me. I started documenting everything. I bought a Ring doorbell camera, then added 2 more cameras, one for the back patio and another facing the driveway. I walked the neighborhood, asking folks polite questions, collecting their stories. Not everyone wanted to talk, but the ones who did. They were fed up and scared. Karen had been a tyrant for years. People just didn't want trouble. Still, I was making progress. Until something happened that set everything back. 1 week after the HOA letter, I came home from a run to find a group of people in front of my house. Karen was there, of course, clipboard in hand. Beside her stood 3 other people, 2 men in polos and khakis, and a woman with sunglasses and a phone filming me as I approached. "This is the homeowner," Karen said to the group. "We're here to perform an inspection." I stopped at the edge of the driveway. "An inspection? Of what?" "Routine HOA property check," she replied. "You were warned." "I wasn't warned about anything." "It's in your mailbox," one of the men said. I opened the mailbox and pulled out a folded letter, dated that morning. Convenient. "This is illegal," I said. "You don't have the right to enter my property without my permission." Karen smirked. "Actually, under Section 5.3 of the HOA covenant, we're allowed to assess homes for compliance at any time with board approval." "You didn't get my approval." "We don't need it," she said sweetly. The group started walking toward my front porch. "Touch that door and I'll call the cops," I said, blocking their way. "And this time, I'll be the one on the phone." One of the men raised his hands. "Look, we don't want a confrontation." "Then walk away." Karen didn't budge. "We're here to make sure community standards are being upheld." "Community standards? You mean your standards?" The woman with the phone kept recording. I turned and looked right at the lens. "My name is Jordan Thomas. I'm a resident and the legal homeowner of this property. I did not authorize this visit. You're all trespassing." I pulled out my phone and started filming too. That made Karen flinch. "Fine," she snapped. "We'll reschedule. But this isn't over." They walked off in a huff, muttering amongst themselves. I stood on my lawn, watching them go. Something told me this wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. She wanted me gone. And the more I stood my ground, the more desperate she got. Later that night, I noticed something on my back patio. At first, I thought it was just shadows playing tricks. But when I checked the camera feed, my heart dropped. Someone had been behind my house, sneaking around. They didn't break anything. They didn't leave a note. But they'd been there. The timestamp was from 2:11 a.m., and the figure in the footage, wearing the same pastel sweater Karen wore that afternoon. I sent the clip to myself and backed it up on 2 drives. Then I made a call to a friend of mine from college, Chloe, who was now a civil attorney in Chicago. "You need to file for a cease and desist," she said immediately after I told her everything. "Possibly even a restraining order." I hesitated. Wouldn't that just escalate things? "She already escalated it," Chloe replied. "You're playing defense and she's playing offense. You need to draw the line now." I agreed. But before I could file anything, the worst happened. The next morning, my front lawn was destroyed. Sprinklers yanked out, plants uprooted, my mailbox ripped from its post, and spray painted across my garage door in bright red letters were 4 words, "Get out or else." I called the police immediately. They came, took photos, filed a report. But again, no suspects, no proof, no arrests. It was clear someone had it out for me. And I didn't have to guess who, because later that day, a package arrived. No return address. Inside the box was the locket. Smashed. Bent. Broken. A note sat on top. In block letters it read, "Family trash." My hands were shaking, my vision blurred, and I knew right then this was war. The locket sat on my desk like a corpse, bent in half, chain torn, the delicate filigree dented beyond repair. I ran my fingers over the cracked silver, remembering the way my father held it in his palm the day he gave it to me. How he said, "This isn't just a necklace, Jordan. This is legacy. This is family." Now it looked like someone had taken a hammer to it just to make a point. I took a photo of the damage, of the note, of the box, then filed it all into the growing folder of evidence I kept beside my bed. But that day, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call the police. Not right away. I just sat still, staring out the window. Karen had gone too far. She'd declared war, and I was done playing nice. The next day, I paid a visit to the county clerk's office. If the HOA wanted to pretend I didn't belong here, I was going to give them a mountain of paperwork they couldn't ignore. I pulled certified copies of my deed, title insurance, inspection records, every single document with a stamp and signature that proved, beyond a shadow of doubt, that I was the legal owner of 112 Sycamore Lane. Then I made 12 copies of everything and personally delivered them to every board member's mailbox, with a signed letter stating that any further harassment would be considered grounds for legal action. I filed a cease and desist order against Karen with the help of Chloe, my friend from law school. We drafted a clear, thorough complaint detailing her repeated trespassing, false police report, public harassment, and the vandalism, along with the tampering of my private property. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet, but it was a warning. And this time, I wasn't bluffing. That same night, I sat on my porch swing, watching the street. My cameras were active. The porch light was on. My neighbors had seen the vandalism, and more than one came by to say they were sorry. Glenn, bless him, even offered to help repaint the garage. "She's losing her grip," he said. "But you gotta be careful now. Karen doesn't take well to losing power." I knew he was right. Because the very next morning, the retaliation came. I was in the middle of a work call when my Wi-Fi dropped. I checked the router, restarted it. Nothing. I called the provider. They said my service had been canceled. "By who?" I asked. "The account holder," the guy on the phone said. "Someone called yesterday and said they were the homeowner, requested full termination of the plan." I was stunned. "You're telling me you disconnected my internet based on a phone call?" They verified the security questions. Karen must have had access to my mail, or maybe she got the info from someone on the inside. I called Chloe again. "Is impersonating someone to cancel their utilities a crime?" "Yes," she said. "And now we go further." She helped me file a report with the local police department, not just for the internet sabotage, but for everything. The harassment, the trespassing, the theft, the destruction of property. I attached the video of her sneaking into my backyard at 2 a.m., the photo of her holding the locket, and the hate note I'd received with it. But I still didn't stop there. I went online and started digging into the HOA's records. I found meeting minutes, bylaws, and past complaints. Most of it was dry, procedural junk, but buried in the files, I found something curious. A clause about interim board appointments in the event of low participation. It meant Karen had been stacking the board for years with people who didn't even live on the block anymore. In fact, one name listed on the most recent board roster was deceased. Another had moved to Florida 2 years ago, yet they were still being listed as present at board votes. It was a paper dictatorship, and now I had proof. The moment I brought it to Chloe, she gave me a quiet whistle. "She's cooked. Can we take this to court?" "You could," she said. "But first, let's try something even better." We drafted a formal petition for Karen's removal. I typed up a summary of all the issues: abuse of power, fraudulent representation, falsified board meetings, and resident harassment. I attached screenshots, signatures, citations. Then, I started knocking on doors. The neighbors who had once been scared, now they were fired up. Miss Charlotte signed immediately. So did Glenn. Marcia practically hugged me when I asked. Even old Mr. Howard, who never left his front porch, grunted out, "About damn time." In 3 days, I had 67 signatures, enough to call for a special vote. The petition was submitted to the HOA's registered office, and copies were sent to each board member's address. Karen must have seen it coming, but not like this. Because that night, on the eve of the vote, I woke up to my fire alarm blaring. Smoke. Everywhere. I scrambled out of bed, heart pounding, lungs burning. The kitchen, my stove was on, blazing. The curtains above it had caught fire. I grabbed the extinguisher and doused the flames before it could spread beyond the corner, but the smell was thick. My hand was shaking as I pulled open the back door for air. And then I saw it. The lock on the back door had been tampered with. Someone had come in and turned on the stove. Deliberately. They wanted to scare me, or worse. I called the fire department, the police, the insurance company. I filed another report. The investigator told me the cause was suspicious, especially since the stove dial had been turned all the way up, but there was no sign of electrical failure. I knew who did it, even if I couldn't prove it yet. But she'd crossed a line. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about safety. The next day, as I stood in front of the entire neighborhood at the special HOA meeting, I looked out at the people whose lives had been ruled by fear, silence, and fake rules. I held up the scorched locket. "My father gave me this," I said. "It's been in my family for 4 generations. 2 weeks ago, it was stolen from my bedroom. This is what it looks like now." Gasps echoed through the room. I moved here to find peace, to honor the people who raised me, and instead, I've had to call the police more times in a month than I ever have in my life. I've been lied to, accused of trespassing on my own porch, had my name dragged, my house vandalized, my family history destroyed. I paused. And I'm not the only one. Voices rose in agreement. Karen sat stiff in the front row, face pale. Today is not just about me. It's about every one of you who's ever paid a fine that didn't make sense, who was told to stay quiet, who was bullied into thinking you didn't belong in the place you call home. I raised the petition. We're taking it back. And just as the board chair opened the vote, Karen stood up. No, she shouted. You don't get to do this. This is my neighborhood. Then she turned toward me, her eyes burning, and screamed, You think you're safe? You think this is over? You have no idea what I can do. And as the room fell silent and people began to rise to their feet, casting their votes, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still ahead. Karen stormed out of the meeting hall like a thundercloud in pearls, her heels clicking furiously against the tile as neighbors turned their heads to avoid her glare. I stayed seated, the scorched locket still clenched in my palm, but my eyes followed her until she vanished into the parking lot. The vote took less than 20 minutes, 92% in favor. Karen was officially removed from her position as HOA president. A new interim board was appointed, and I was asked to help guide the transition, though I politely declined. All I wanted was to live in peace, mow my lawn, pay my dues, and not have to brace myself every time the doorbell rang. But Karen wasn't done, not by a long shot. The next day, she filed an appeal with the city clerk's office, claiming the vote was illegal due to procedural flaws. That same morning, she filed a harassment complaint against me, citing public humiliation, targeted attacks, and damage to reputation. Her lawyer, a guy who probably printed his own business cards in the back of a gas station, sent me a cease and desist letter claiming I was stalking her. It was all noise, but noise that echoed. The neighborhood was divided. Most people supported me, but a few held onto Karen's version of the story like it was gospel. They muttered when I passed by. Some even reposted cryptic Facebook messages from her page, posts filled with phrases like false neighbors, targeted persecution, and my side will come out. I tried to keep calm, to remind myself that truth has a longer reach than lies. But then, something happened that changed everything. That Friday, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't the mailman, or Glenn, or Miss Charlotte with her warm banana bread. It was a boy, no more than 10. He stood on my porch, nervous, shifting from foot to foot. You Jordan? He asked. Yeah, I said, crouching a bit. Who are you? My name's Mason. I live 4 houses down. My grandma, she told me not to come here. But I saw something. And I thought, maybe you should know. My heartbeat quickened. Come inside. He stepped into the living room and sat at the edge of the couch. His sneakers barely touched the floor. I saw Miss Karen go into your house. When? The night your lights went out. I was supposed to be asleep, but I snuck out to look for my tablet in the car. That's when I saw her walk out your back door. She was wearing gloves. You're sure it was her? He nodded hard. She dropped something. I picked it up. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small brass key. I recognized it immediately. It was the backup key to my side gate, the one I kept hidden behind the flower bed. She didn't notice, he whispered. But I did. I sat down slowly, the weight of the key burning in my palm. Why are you telling me this? He looked down. Because my dad said we should always speak up when something's wrong, and I don't want to live next to people who do mean things. My throat tightened. Thank you, Mason. You did the right thing. He gave me a nervous smile, then scampered off. I locked the door behind him. Then I called Chloe. She told me this changed everything. The vandalism, The locket, the fire, they're not just suspicions anymore, she said. That boy is a witness, and that key, that's unauthorized access. We need to go all the way now. We gathered every piece of evidence: video footage, photos, timelines, the smashed locket, Mason's statement. Chloe filed for a temporary restraining order, then prepared a full civil lawsuit. Trespassing, harassment, property damage, emotional distress. And this time, I wasn't alone. 6 other residents signed on: Marcia, Miss Charlotte, Glenn, and 3 others who'd all faced Karen's wrath at some point. Some had paid unlawful fines. One had their car towed without notice. Another had been reported for a non-existent pet violation. We weren't neighbors anymore. We were plaintiffs. When the court date was announced, word spread fast. Local news picked up the story. Homeowner battles HOA president over alleged harassment, sabotage, and stolen heirloom. They used a photo of my house with a blurred shot of the red spray paint on the garage. I didn't ask for publicity, but it came anyway. Karen, of course, denied everything. She posted cryptic videos on her Facebook page talking about smears and ungrateful invaders. In one video, she was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and pacing in her backyard like she was running for office. But the court didn't care about theatrics. They cared about proof, and we had plenty. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Just 2 days before the court hearing, I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. I ran downstairs barefoot, heart thumping, breath caught in my chest, and I stopped cold. A brick had been thrown through my front window. Glass sparkled across the floor like ice. And next to the brick, a photo of my father, the one I kept in my upstairs hallway. Someone had taken it, and written on the back, in thick black marker, "Shouldn't have come back." My knees buckled. I sat on the stairs, shaking. I didn't care about court anymore. This wasn't just about the HOA. This was about my family, about who I was. Someone was trying to erase me, but I wouldn't let them. I stood up, still barefoot, and grabbed the photo like it was a weapon. And I swore to myself right then. They wanted me to run, but I wasn't going anywhere. The courtroom was cold. Not physically. No, the heat was on, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. But something about the air felt stiff, like truth had to squeeze its way in through cracks in the drywall. Karen sat 2 rows ahead of me with her lawyer, that same guy with the crooked tie and a briefcase that looked borrowed. She didn't look like the queen bee of Sycamore Lane today. No pastels, no pearls, just black slacks, a wrinkled blazer, and a face full of fury barely held together with concealer. The judge was a tall black woman with sharp glasses and a tone that cut through lies like scissors through thread. She wasn't here for drama. That became clear when Karen's lawyer tried to open with a long-winded rant about community preservation and how certain homeowners had ignored traditional standards. The judge raised a hand mid-sentence. "Sir, please tell me what that has to do with trespassing, property destruction, and impersonating a homeowner to cancel utilities." Karen's mouth dropped slightly. I leaned back in my seat. Chloe stood next and laid it all out with the grace of someone born to end nonsense. She presented the videos, the neighbor testimonies, the photos of the smashed locket, the torn plants, the vandalized garage, and the final piece, the brick through my window with my father's photo attached. The courtroom was dead silent when she read the words scrawled on the back, "Shouldn't have come back." Chloe's voice didn't tremble. This was not just a vendetta. It was an attempt to erase Mr. Thomas from his own life, from his own home, and there's no HOA clause in the world that permits that. Karen's lawyer stood again, but this time the judge didn't even wait. "Unless you have contradictory evidence, I've heard enough." He sat down, defeated. Karen fidgeted. Her eyes darted to the exit doors. She looked like a cornered animal. "Ms. Price," the judge said slowly, her voice low and precise, "you have not only disgraced the purpose of a homeowners association, but you have endangered lives and abused your neighbors. I am granting Mr. Thomas a permanent restraining order. You are to remain no less than 300 feet from his home and person at all times. I'm also ordering an immediate review of your HOA board practices, and I expect a full audit within 30 days. Karen's mouth opened, but the judge was already done. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck, and just like that, Karen Price's reign ended. But that's not the wild part. Because what happened after is the part people still talk about. It started with a truck. 3 days after the court ruling, a large moving truck appeared in front of Karen's house. Not hers. No, this one was marked with a logo, County Property Seizures and Investigations. Turns out, in addition to bullying her neighbors, Karen had also been embezzling from the HOA fund. Chloe found it first. During the audit, there were administrative fees listed under her name, tens of thousands over the past 5 years, garden renovations that were never done, sidewalk repair money that disappeared, HOA payments marked pending that had actually gone into her personal bank account. She'd been using HOA funds to fund her lifestyle, spa treatments, designer bags, a 3-day trip to Boca Raton labeled as a compliance conference. The county pressed charges, fraud, misappropriation of community funds, identity theft, and her house, it was repossessed. That truck? It was hauling out her furniture, her boxes, her pastel curtains, her fake, vintage wine rack. But wait, that's still not the wildest part, because 2 weeks later, the HOA held a neighborhood auction. Karen's property was listed as a foreclosure. The crowd showed up out of pure curiosity. Half the block lined up just to watch the fall of the neighborhood tyrant. And guess who put in a bid? Me. With some of the settlement money I got from the civil suit, and a little help from Chloe, I put in the lowest possible offer, just to make a point. The house sold to me for a fraction of its worth. The day I got the keys, I walked inside, took a deep breath, and smiled. I didn't want to live there, not really. That house held too much bitterness, too much bad energy. But I did want to make it a place that meant something good again. So I donated it to a local foster care foundation that helps teens transition into adult life after the system. They turned it into a group home for young adults, a safe space. The neighborhood that Karen tried to rule? It's now run by an elected HOA with real rules, real fairness, and rotating leadership. Glenn's one of the members. Miss Charlotte runs the community garden committee. Marcia organizes block parties with bounce houses and barbecue pits. Me? I stayed in my house, the one Karen tried to erase me from. I fixed the garage, repainted the walls, planted fresh flowers where the old ones had been ripped out. And the locket? I had it restored. It's not perfect. The crack still shows. A dent on one side. But it hangs on my hallway wall now, next to the photo of my father. Uncensored, unburned, unbroken. People who visit the house sometimes ask about the story, and I tell them one thing. Sometimes home isn't just where you live, it's where you choose to stand your ground.